I grew up in a small town tucked away in the vast evergreen heart of the Pacific Northwest, a place where the mist clings to the trees like a ghostly veil and the scent of damp earth and cedar needles is as familiar as breathing. Our house was a humble cabin on the edge of a deep, quiet lake, a place the locals rarely visited, hidden behind thick stands of fir and cedar, far enough from the nearest road to be touched only by the wind and the distant call of loons. To me, it was home, a world apart where time moved slower, and the noise of civilization was a faint memory. From the moment I could walk, that lake was my sanctuary. I spent endless hours exploring its shores, fishing on its banks with a rickety pole, and skimming stones across the surface on hot summer days. I knew the layout of the forest trails like the lines on my palm. I knew where the sunflowers bloomed wild along the eastern bank, where the jagged rocks jutted out from the water near the South Cove, and which trees were home to the hawks that nested high above. It was a place of peace, mystery, and childhood wonder. That summer, I was 17. It was the kind of summer that stretched on forever, filled with long days of sun and warmth, the smell of pine resin and wet earth. On this particular evening, the sky was streaked with gold and crimson as the sun began its slow descent. The temperature dropped just enough to bring a crispness to the air that hinted at the coming autumn. There was a calmness to the lake that felt almost sacred, like the world was holding its breath in reverence. I decided to take my old kayak out, a faded green vessel that had been my companion for years, worn smooth by sun and water. I pushed it off from the mossy wooden dock and slipped quietly into the glassy water, letting the paddle drop silently into the lake. The kayak glided forward like a leaf on a still pond. At first, everything was exactly as I remembered. The gentle ripple of the water lapping against the hull, the distant song of a thrush hidden deep in the trees, the scent of damp moss and cedar sap rising on the cooling breeze. The lake was a mirror, flawless and serene, reflecting the fiery sky and the shadowed silhouettes of towering evergreens. I paddled slowly, enjoying the solitude and the way the fading light painted the water in streaks of molten gold and deep purple. My thoughts wandered to simpler times, to lazy summer afternoons and laughter shared with old friends. But as I reached roughly the halfway point between shore and the small island that jutted like a dark sentinel in the center of the lake, something caught my eye. Beneath the surface, something was moving. At first, I thought it might be a large fish or a driftwood log carried by the gentle current. But as I peered closer, squinting against the fading light, I saw that the shape was too deliberate, too controlled. It was a dark shadow, broad and shifting, gliding slowly just beneath the water like a predator stalking unseen prey. The movement was fluid but purposeful, smooth and silent. It did not meander like a stray branch or flicker like a school of fish. A deep unease settled in my chest. The quiet hum of the evening seemed to drop away, the forest and lake falling into a hush that pressed in around me. My breath hitched as I scanned the water, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The shadow did not break the surface, but it followed me, staying just below, always in the same position beneath the kayak, as if it were keeping pace. The temperature seemed to drop rapidly. A sudden, sharp chill crept up my spine and wrapped around my limbs like ice. I gripped my paddle tighter, knuckles whitening, but the calm surface of the lake betrayed no sign of disturbance. The shadow was there, just beneath the glassy skin of the water, but the lake itself was unnervingly still. Then the water shifted violently. Without warning, the lake erupted in a ring of ripples, waves crashing against my kayak sides as if some enormous force was pushing against me, trying to capsize the fragile vessel. The boat rocked wildly, water sloshing inside it, and my heart pounded in my chest like a drumbeat of panic. Yelled, though my voice was swallowed by the thickening dusk. I paddled harder, frantically, desperate to reach the shore. My arms burned, muscles trembling with exertion, but the shadow was always there, just out of reach, dark and endless beneath the water, watching me with something that felt ancient and malevolent. Every time I glanced over the edge, I saw it, a dark, shifting mass, too large and too purposeful to be anything natural. My mind raced through every horror story and legend I had ever heard. Creatures lurking in deep water, ancient spirits bound to the earth, shadows that ate the light. But none of that could prepare me for the feeling of being hunted. The sun disappeared completely behind the trees, plunging the world into a twilight that felt thick and suffocating. The sky's last colors faded to inky black, and the stars began to emerge, pale pinpricks of cold light reflected on the lake's surface. The forest at the shoreline became an impenetrable wall of darkness. The trees like silent watchers, their limbs reaching like fingers toward the sky. The shadow moved again, closer this time. I could feel its gaze boring into me. A presence so heavy and suffocating it felt like a physical weight pressing down through the water and into my bones. Fear clamped my throat shut and my hands shook as I gripped the paddle with trembling fingers. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I reached the safety of the shore. I hauled myself out of the kayak, my legs weak and unsteady, my breath ragged and visible in the cool night air. The damp earth and crushed pine needles beneath my feet were cold and real, grounding me after the surreal terror of the lake. I looked back once more. The water was still again, a perfect mirror reflecting the star-studded sky. But then, in the fading darkness near the center of the lake, two glowing eyes flickered briefly. Small, eerie orbs of phosphorescent light that stared at me from beneath the surface before vanishing as suddenly as they appeared. I stood there, frozen, heart still pounding, the echo of that silent, watchful presence lingering long after the eyes disappeared. I didn't speak about what happened that night. I didn't tell anyone. Because some shadows are meant to stay beneath the water, in the dark places where light does not reach, waiting. And I never went back. Nestled deep within the rugged wilderness of the Adirondack Mountains, there lies a lake that few dare to visit. Surrounded by towering pines and thick, tangled underbrush, it is a place where the modern world feels like a distant memory, replaced by the whispers of ancient trees and the subtle rhythms of untouched nature. It was here, in this remote corner of the world, that the story of the drowned cabin took root, a tale as chilling as the cold mountain air. The legend had been passed down for generations by the few locals who still called this area home. They spoke of a small, weather-beaten cabin that once stood proudly at the lake's edge. It was said to be a cozy retreat for hunters and fishermen, a simple sanctuary where time slowed and the worries of the world melted away. But one spring, years ago, the exact year lost to time, the lake's water level rose suddenly and inexplicably, swallowing the shoreline and dragging the cabin into its depths. Some said it was a freak storm. Others whispered of something darker, a curse tied to the land. What remained was a sunken skeleton of the cabin lying just beneath the lake's placid surface. On the calmest days when the wind was still and the water a flawless glass, the outlines of the broken beams, shattered furniture, and the cabin's frame could be seen clearly, haunting remnants of a life submerged and forgotten. For years I had heard this story secondhand, fascinated but skeptical. But the lure of mystery and the promise of uncovering something hidden drew me and a few close friends deep into the Adirondacks one early spring. We were young, adventurous, and hungry for stories that could set our imaginations on fire. Our plan was simple: find the lake, explore the water, and see if the legend of the drowned cabin was real. The journey to the lake was long and winding, a test of patience through dense forests where sunlight filtered weakly through the canopy. The smell of wet earth and fresh pine filled the air, and the occasional call of a distant loon reminded us how far from civilization we had traveled. By the time we reached the lake's edge, the sun was hanging low, its dying light casting a golden glow across the water. The lake itself was unnerving in its stillness. Its surface was so perfectly calm that it looked less like water and more like a vast mirror, reflecting the towering trees and cloudy sky with eerie precision. There was a strange quality to the silence, as if the lake was holding its breath, watching us as much as we watched it. We slipped into the water, the cold immediately biting at our skin. The spring meltwater was icy and sharp, a shock after the warmth of the day. Despite the chill, we pressed forward, swimming steadily toward the spot where the cabin's remains were said to lie. The water deepened quickly, darkening from translucent green to a thick, impenetrable shade. Below the surface, the lake was a shadowy world of its own, muted colors, shifting shapes, and a strange stillness that felt almost unnatural. As we descended further, the first outlines began to take shape. Jagged beams, broken floorboards, and the skeletal frame of a once sturdy cabin, now twisted and broken by years of water pressure and decay. The sight was both beautiful and unsettling. The wood, stained black and green with algae, bore the marks of time. cracked, splintered, and swallowed by the dark depths. What was once a place of refuge now resembled a watery grave, frozen in a moment of tragic collapse. Nearby, I glimpsed the shape of what looked like a wooden chair, half buried in the muddy lake bed, its legs tangled in a mass of roots and sediment. As I hovered there, taking it all in, I suddenly felt a touch, a chilling, clammy sensation brushing against my calf. My heart jumped in my throat, and I pulled away sharply, water splashing around me. The cold contact was unmistakable, like the icy fingers of a drowned hand. I looked around frantically, but my friends were still exploring, oblivious to what I had felt. They joked and pointed at interesting relics, laughing nervously, their voices distant echoes beneath the water. But for me, the sensation returned, that same cold touch, brushing against my skin again and again, deliberate and impossible to ignore. Panic began to rise inside me. Was it a snag of kelp, a fish, or something else? Something unseen and ancient that had claimed this lake as its domain. The weight of fear settled like a stone in my chest, and I felt the breath catch in my throat. I wanted to surface, to escape the grasp of that cold, clammy presence, but something rooted me in place, a strange, morbid curiosity mixed with dread. The submerged cabin felt alive with memory and sorrow, as if it held the spirits of those who once lived there, trapped beneath the water's surface. Finally, we decided to return to shore, the chill of the water sapping our strength and the growing darkness reminding us of the long hike back. As we climbed out, shivering and soaked, one of my friends, her face pale, confided that she had heard faint whispers, soft voices drifting through the water, too low to understand, but unmistakably human. She said it was only when we were near the cabin's remains, as if the drowned spirits themselves were calling out, trying to be heard from beneath the waves. The idea sent a shiver down my spine. Was it the wind, our imaginations, or something else? Something real and restless, lying beneath the glassy surface. We left the lake that day with a lingering unease, the image of the drowned cabin etched into our minds. Sometimes, even now, when I'm near still water, a silent pond or a calm lake, I think I hear those whispers again, faint and carried on the wind. The voices of the drowned reaching out from their watery tomb. The drowned cabin is more than a legend now. For me, it is a place where the past refuses to stay buried, where water and wood and memory mingle, haunting the edges of reality like a shadow that never quite disappears. I worked as a park ranger for a sprawling wilderness reserve in northern Minnesota, a place where the earth still feels raw and untamed and nature holds tight to its ancient secrets. The heart of the park was a vast remote lake, a deep, cold expanse carved out by glaciers during the last ice age, surrounded by endless forests that stretched out in every direction, thick with towering pines, firs, and hardwoods. The land felt sacred, untouched by the rush of the modern world, yet it held a quiet menace beneath its tranquil surface. During the day, the lake was a haven for campers, fishermen, and hikers who came to enjoy its serene beauty. The sparkling water mirrored the sky, while loons called mournfully in the distance and eagles soared overhead. Families pitched tents in small clearings along the shore, and anglers cast their lines hoping to catch walleye or northern pike. But despite the daylight charm, an unspoken rule lingered in the air. No one stayed overnight. The locals whispered of strange noises, unexplained phenomena, and a restless presence that awakened when the sun dipped behind the mountains. The stories told of voices carried on the wind, eerie laughter, and whispering murmurs that floated across the lake after dark. Campers who ignored the warnings often left in the middle of the night, pale and shaken, refusing to speak of what they heard. I was skeptical at first. As a ranger, I valued facts and safety above superstition, but even I couldn't deny that something was off about that lake once the shadows grew long. It felt as if the forest and water themselves held their breath, watching silently, waiting for the veil between worlds to thin. One particularly cold autumn evening, the air sharp with the promise of winter, I set out on a routine patrol along the lake's perimeter. The sky was clear, the moon a pale sliver hanging low, casting a silvery glow that bathed the treetops and turned the water into a sheet of glass. The forest was unnervingly quiet, no rustling leaves, no chirping insects, just the faint crunch of my boots on the frost-hardened earth. As I walked along the narrow trail by the water's edge, my senses sharpened. I noticed the temperature seemed to drop inexplicably, and an odd stillness settled over the landscape. Then, out of the silence, I heard it, a soft, fragile whisper drifting on the night air. The voices were almost like a lullaby, delicate and distant, barely audible at first. They seemed to weave in and out of the gentle breeze, curling around the trees and sliding across the water's surface. The words were indistinct, but as I stopped to listen, I realized the whispers were calling names. Slow, mournful intonations that sent a shiver racing down my spine. Some names were unmistakable. They belonged to people from the nearby town. Names I knew well, neighbors and friends. Others were strange and foreign, names that felt ancient and lost to time. The voices called with a heartbreaking urgency, like the desperate pleas of souls trapped between worlds, reaching out for connection, for release. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, I moved closer to the water, the ground soft and wet beneath my boots. The moonlight flickered across the ripples that began to form, subtle movements that spread outward in unnatural patterns. The lake seemed to breathe beneath the moon, alive with unseen energy. The whispers grew louder, overlapping now, a chorus of fragile voices rising in desperation. I could almost make out words. Come home, don't leave me, stay with us. But the meaning was blurred, like a half-remembered dream slipping away with dawn. Suddenly, the water at my feet began to churn, bubbles breaking the surface as if something just beneath was stirring awake. An invisible force seemed to reach out toward me, grasping with icy fingers that pulled and tugged at my legs. I tried to step back, but the roots of an ancient tree tangled beneath the leaf litter caught my foot. I stumbled and fell hard onto the cold, damp ground. My heart pounded wildly as I scrambled to my feet and looked down. The water was eerily still once again, the surface smooth and unbroken. The voices ceased completely, as if whatever had been calling me beneath the water's edge had vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. I stood there trembling, a cold sweat breaking across my forehead. Questions swirled in my mind. What was it that reached for me in the dark? What ancient sorrow dwelled beneath the lake's silent surface, whispering names like a mournful chant? The fear settled deep in my bones, an icy weight that I carried with me back to the ranger station. From that night onward, I never ventured near the lake alone after dark. Even the brightest moonlight and the clearest skies couldn't dispel the feeling that the lake was watching, waiting, its whispers never truly gone, just hidden, waiting for the next soul to answer its call. The lake had secrets older than any living memory, and some voices beneath the water refused to be silenced. If the creeping dread of the shadow in the water, the sunken sorrows of the drowned cabin, and the chilling chorus of the lake's whisper left you clinging to the safety of dry land, welcome to the depths of Lake Horror. Beneath the serene surface of every tranquil lake lies a world of forgotten terrors, where shadows glide like hunters, drowned voices plead for release, and the water itself holds its breath. Before you retreat to the warmth of campfire light, shatter that like button if these tales dragged you under their icy grip. Share this video with anyone brave enough to paddle into the unknown, and subscribe to plunge deeper into the abyss. Every click is a ripple in the dark, a promise that the next horror is always lurking just beneath the waves. Now the lake turns its gaze to you. Have you felt the brush of something cold and unseen against your ankle in the shallows? Heard whispers rise like mist from midnight waters? Maybe you've glimpsed a shape gliding beneath your boat, or watched ripples form with no source, as if the lake itself were breathing. Whether it's a cabin swallowed by time, a face reflected where none should be, or a voice that calls your name in the stillness, confess it. Share your story in the comments, or send it sealed in silence. Your encounter could dredge up the next chapter of Liquid Nightmare, or summon what waits in the deep. To those already adrift in these black waters, ring the bell to ensure you never miss a descent into the murk. Follow us into the fog on social media, where we map cursed shorelines, decode drowned diaries, and dare to ask what ancient thing sleeps beneath the lake bed. Check the description for links, eerie sonar readings, and coordinates to the heart of the abyss. If you're willing to wade in, as the moon climbs and the loons fall silent, remember this: lakes are not mirrors. They are windows. The shadows that glide beneath, the cabins that rot in the dark, the voices that hum in the currents, they've been waiting for you. Patient, hungry, eternal. So keep your oars close and your lanterns brighter. Never linger too long on the dock after dusk. And if you hear the water whisper your name, run. The line between reflection and reality dissolves like mist, and in the lake's embrace, nothing stays buried. Until next time, wanderers, may your shores stay still, your depths stay silent, and your ripples stay small. But if they don't, we'll be here, anchored in the shadows, listening for the splash.